Welcome to the National Council for Hypnotherapy podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of hypnosis, lifting the lid on hypnotherapy, sharing insights and tips for change as we chat. So sit back, relax, and enjoy all the wonderful possibilities of hypnotherapy. My name is Tracey Grist, and I will be your host today. So I'm here today with the lovely Selway Wooley, a solution-focused hypnotherapist. Hi, Andy. Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you today?
I'm good. It's a nice, miserable grey morning, but on the positive, I'm speaking to you, so
Nice.
good. All is good.
So you're a solution-focused hypnotherapist. What led you into is it your second career, your primary career? What led you down this pathway?
So my background is human resources. So I got sort of HR director level, mainly working for sort of smaller businesses. So I was usually like the only HR person either in the country or by myself. So my job's always been very people focused. I've always been the person people go to for any concerns. You know, it's pretty much like being an octopus when you're the only HR person in a company. I did that for about 20 years or so, and then I became an HR consultant. So set my own business, going into small companies that needed some HR support.
Yeah.
So I did that for a couple of years. And then I opened a recruitment agency. Well, actually, I bought one probably in 2016. So I recruited HR people. So I did that for 4 years, again, running my own business. And I think during that time, because I had such a good network and connection, I started running events and they were being sponsored by big companies. And essentially, I just burnt myself out. Like it was so intense.
Yeah. What sort of events?
Sorry, Sarah.
What sort of events did you?
Just HR events for HR people. So I was running events for like 150 people, doing that. And obviously recruitment is commission only. So you don't get paid unless you place. So lots of frustration, lots of, I guess, competition in London. You know, it's very much, you have to be very quick. And my personality was quite quick as well. So I was riding that wave for a good 3 years, but I didn't notice myself burning out. I was doing probably like 70, 80-hour weeks, you know, riding on the adrenaline, but I think you can only do that for so much. So COVID came and I furloughed myself and had 3 months off. And during that time, I actually went to saw a hypnotherapist as well because I was still suffering with the burnout. I actually really enjoyed lockdown. For me, I use this a lot in my practice around sort of going out and doing things, spending more time with family, you know, quietening down your like nervous system and everything. So yes, everything was nice and calm, and it gave me the chance to actually get back into the right part of my brain to make a decision on what I actually really wanted to do in life. So my degree's in biology. I'd always toyed with being a paramedic. So during lockdown, I volunteered in Stoke Mandeville Hospital in A&E as a healthcare assistant. And I also did patient transport. So I was driving ambulances because I thought I need the experience to get into the paramedic service, essentially. So I did that for a year. And a lot of it was very much patient engagement, which I really loved. So I was doing like an 11-hour shift for free. I was thinking I'm so energized after this. It was such a lovely thing to do. So I think I found my passion during that time, joined the ambulance service and did the qualifications, which, you know, I enjoy that anyway. So for me, I think that's quite an easy thing. I love that. And then I did the blue light driving and then realized that actually I'm not great in an emergency. So I'm fine with the patients, just don't put me in the driving seat. So again, I'm the same hypnotherapist and essentially just came to the decision, what do I actually enjoy doing? And it was the patient interaction. Because they didn't have any visitors, my job was just to listen to them, to reassure them. You know, I wasn't qualified to give advice. So it was very much a case of just active listening, which without any agenda, obviously with recruitment, it was very much agenda-driven sales, looking out for something to, you know, to grab onto. So this was very much just 11 hours of just being kind to people in their sort of 11 hours of need when they were in my ward. So I basically started a counselling qualification, I did that. I went back into recruitment, did like 4 days a week, just on the basis of this is just to earn some money. And then I think in my second year of counselling, I just thought hypnotherapy, I've had this really worked for me. And I decided to do a qualification as an add-on to my counselling studies. So counselling takes 4 years part-time. So at this point, I still haven't actually seen a real client in counselling. We're still in the
Yeah.
practice stage. So I just went and did a hypnotherapy qualification. I did it in a year. It's an intensive weekends course. And it was really good, actually. It made us, we were learning things, but we had to practice on people. So to me, I was really hungry to do that. And because we had all this wraparound support, we were learning all of the facts and the theory, but we were also gradually practicing with people. So started off with friends, then the friends of friends, and then I was able to be a student and actually charge as a student hypnotherapist. So it just grew from there, really. So I'm still training to be a counselor, but I've been running a hypnotherapy practice for a year. So it's been like a really quite an intense experience, but my journey there has been very much, oh, what's he doing now? Oh, he's changed his career again. But I am someone that I think you have to find what you don't like sometimes to really understand what you do like, and just not be afraid of people thinking this about you and just going, do you know what? I'm just going to do this because in my heart, I feel like this is the right path. So it was very much, yes, it was very head driven around strategic pathways, but you have to just sort of not really worry about what other people think. And I obviously say that a lot to my clients now. So I really empathize with people that are guided by someone else's opinion, or you should do that, or, what if? No, what is? Where does that should come from? And I think that word should is quite a powerful, reflective word for people. What do I want to do? Where am I in this? As opposed to what other people think that I should be doing. So
Well, also, I think that expectation, isn't it? I remember I was training to be a counsellor, and I was a stained glass artist before, and I really wanted to do the counselling and train and become a counsellor, and I got an opportunity to rechange my life, and I started the counselling course, and I was a couple of years in thinking, what is this? Because I'm quite solution focused in that way. I like an outcome and I like a target for people. And so this sort of open road of discovery and non-implementation, I was starting to twitch and think, oh no. And I remember walking around the comment, my dog at the time, with my friend, going, I don't think this is for me. I'm a roll my sleeves up and let's get on. And really struggling. And I said to my best friend, Chris, at the time, who still is my best friend, I said, I've seen a hypnotherapy course. I'm going to put it on my credit card because I had no money because I was training and doing all of that. I'm going to put it on my credit card. And this is the last ditch attempt to and similar, I started the work, I started the training, I started working with people and thinking, this is it. And I think we expect something to be the final solution, don't we? And then when we actually do it, we think,
I always say to clients, you have to be flexible with a goal and pivot. So a lot of the time that fear of failure is because we've got such a rigid goal. So we make those really small steps, which is what our solution focus teaches people. You make small steps towards it so that the brain doesn't think this is uncomfortable, this is so uncomfortable, I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to do what I've always done. So I think with counseling, I agree to an extent, whereby solution focused hypnotherapy is very much let's just move forward, and counseling is very much a let's reflect back on the past of where we are now. So yeah, I definitely struggled when I did both qualifications, because when I was doing solution focus, I was very much sort of looking at it from, oh, I wonder what's happened, or I wonder what theory this is informing on the client, but that wasn't my job to do that. And then when I was doing counseling training and practicing, it was very much a case of like you said, let's move this on now. So, what small thing could we do if we made the magic wand? What would be different? What would that change? And there's all these lovely questions. So, like, I'm doing it from my goal would be to be, which is what my counseling course is, an integrative course. So I'm doing person-centered, which is like the foundation of talking therapy with CBT and psychodynamic. So with hypnotherapy and solution focus, and I'm also doing a mindfulness and meditation qualification. So that's sort of mindfulness-based stress reduction. So it gives me the ability to go to the client and go, what do I think is going to benefit this person? Because I think what I always thought was someone's had counselling and they've understood the past and how they've got to where they are, but they need someone to help them rewire their brain, because you know what the problem is, but you need to find the solution. But a lot of people will come to me to understand from the neuroscience point of view what's going on with them and how that helps. They understand, the beneficial neurotransmitters, how we get them to have more of those. They get to understand how sleep's important. They essentially get to understand like the stress bucket and what that does to the brain. And then they go to a counsellor because they feel more ready to go, because they're given those tools to understand sort of where they are emotionally within that bucket. So in counselling, we call it that window of tolerance. So some people will come to me and go, okay, I feel quite confident, I feel quite relaxed now to now go and explore the past. So people come and go all the time. Sometimes if someone is very much talking about the past, so in solution focus, we don't focus on the past, we only focused on the future, the here and now and the future. If someone keeps going back, and I mean not like the first few sessions, because essentially when someone says I'm going to see a therapist, you just expect to talk about what's happened, don't you? But if someone is always going back, then I will sort of sit with them and go, is this the right therapy for you? If this is something you want to explore, I will help you find a more appropriate, and maybe come back to me once you've explored that. So again, I'm not someone that thinks that there's only one type of therapy that suits everybody, which is why I want to do an integrative approach, because different things sometimes require a slightly different approach. And some people respond differently to different things as well. So not everybody responds to this, not everyone responds to counseling. There's so many different modalities of therapy, and one isn't better or right than the other. And it's very person-centered anyway. It's got the same thread. It's just done in a slightly different way. If you look at all the theories, they've all come from almost the same root. They've just all branched off into different things.
Yeah. And so do you ascribe to the right person, the right therapist, and that union of working together?
What do you mean? Sorry.
In as much as that you have an open consultation, do you offer a bit of...
Oh God, yeah. I do a free, it's sometimes an hour, but it's supposed to be a 45-minute consultation. That is really to give someone that really safe space to just sort of say, okay, how can I help you? If our work together was a success, what would you have achieved? So I ask some questions around anxiety markers. I do probably like 25 minutes about how the brain works. So that's basically allowing people to understand why they're feeling the way they do. And also if someone's sort of coming up with specific anxiety markers, just really linking that back to the neuroscience of it. So people actually feel like, oh, okay, that's what's happening. So I think giving people the power of knowledge to understand, okay, this is the reasons why my brain is spinning off in this direction. This is the reason why I'm hyper-focusing on things. It makes people feel like essentially they're not going crazy. This is our primitive brain. It's designed to keep us safe. Yours is just a bit more active at the moment. And they're like, I've never thought of it like that. So for me, doing that initial consultation, which I do for free, now the reason I do it for free is I want it to be accessible to people. Most people coming to me have some form of anxiety or worry or concern or low confidence, and have had loads of therapy before. A lot of them have done the NHS pathways, which, especially the CBT, which I think is actually a really good modality. But I think personally, I don't think when it's prescribed to people, they're not given enough support at that time. So everybody's like, CBT is rubbish because it doesn't have the wraparound care support. So people will come to me with lots of evidence of this hasn't worked, this hasn't worked. So I want to make it quite accessible to people to say, actually, you can come and see me. We can talk about it. I can tell you how I work, what the process is. And then you can decide as the client whether I'm the right therapist, this is the right approach for you, and also they might have had hypnotherapy before. So I have to explain, find out what sort they had and how mine's different. So there's all these questions people have, and they're in quite an anxious state. So for me, it's just giving them the space to say, hey, it's fine. I offer this for free. There's no obligation whatsoever. So go away and think about it. If you need to have another conversation, let's have another conversation. So again, I've got an automation on my website that allows people to book it. So I typically will call them up before and say, I've noticed you've booked. Hello. Make sure they know where the parking is. If you'd have any problems finding me, here's my telephone number. I meet them at my gate. So I arrive before. So it's taking away all of those obstacles where people feel slightly uncomfortable about coming into someone's therapy space that's anxious about life in general. So for me, that's why I don't charge. I mean, don't get me wrong, we do get a lot of people sometimes just cancelling last minute, but majority of them will rebook, have a conversation with me. And because I've continued and persisted and they don't feel like I've just gone out, whatever, then they generally will come back. Or we'll talk it through on the phone first for 15 minutes. And I'll be like, okay, now you have a general understanding of what this is. Come in, like, they make a cup of tea, we'll rebook. I'm not a scary person. Do you know what I mean? It's very much, it's different to what I thought it would be, because I'm as a recruiter, very efficient in admin, because you have to be. So over the last year, it's sort of, I guess, as I've been doing this, understanding what people need and also asking for feedback, what would have been better at the start? Would you have preferred this? So over time, I've refined it and made it more, I suppose, person-centered and more friendly, the approach, as opposed to book here for initial consultation and I'll see you when I see you sort of thing.
Well, and also, we know that people are coming to us who are more likely to be anxious or stressed, and we understand anxiety and the pushing, pulling of, it's a big step, isn't it? Going
100%. So I also see teenagers now, which
Right.
means the parents have to come into the consultation. So I obviously have teenagers there, and you sometimes don't know whether the parents wanted them to come or they're there by their own free will. So again, I always say this to the teenagers, do you not think that I was nervous when I first then realized I have to do my consultation to 3 people as opposed to 1 person? But I always use that as an analogy to say, of course my brain was a little bit, I've not done this before. All those self-doubts keep creeping in, but I've done it once. Nothing bad happened. I've learned from it. It doesn't need to be perfect. And the more I do it, the more my brain realizes that it's fine. So then I always use that as my comfort zone, just increases ever so slightly, and that becomes my new normal. So I do use myself sometimes, not all the time, because I think self-disclosure is quite an important thing, to not make it about me, but to make it around them. But if someone is feeling overly nervous and I think there's something that I can describe to go, hey, you're not on your own here. Everybody has some form of anxiety. It's normal. It's whether it cripples you not to do anything or whether you move towards something, but it's uncomfortable. You will still feel uncomfortable doing things. That's life. We all need a bit of competition stress. We all need that little bit of. So I always say to clients, because I think a lot of people think that I'm going to just do that pocket watch thing and I'm never going to be worried about anything ever again. But I always say, won't that make you extremely unsafe and vulnerable in society if you're not worried about anything? So I just say to people that this will make you feel more in control so that you can distinguish what that anxiety is and you move towards it. And then you move towards it, and then you've done something that you thought you'd never do. What small thing can you do to move towards it, to practice? What would make it easier? So we start convincing our brain that actually this doesn't need to be a fight, flight, freeze response anymore. I always say to people, be realistic with what, a couple of sessions will achieve. So, 'cause I think there is lots of, buy this download, and then your public speaker
Bored.
will be like the next TED Talk speaker, you'll be some sort of foot influencer. It helps get confidence, but you still have to keep practicing and putting yourself in that situation. You have to keep showing up,
Yeah,
keep telling your brain that actually it's fine.
yeah. Doing the work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So,
what we all do,
yeah,
yeah.
you mentioned at the start that you look for anxiety markers when you're working with somebody. What are you looking for? So if somebody was listening and they didn't know they had anxiety and they just thought they were going a little bit batshit crazy, like what would anxiety markers look like?
So it's things like IBS, for example. I always say I'm gonna panic poo. So that adrenaline response in your body where you're in fight, flight, freeze. So that rechecking things, the brain goes into hypervigilant mode, nail biting, picking, the self-soothing. I ask questions around, what else do I ask? So there's some questions around, for example, alcohol. So I don't think people know that when we drink, our REM sleep gets affected. So our brain isn't processing the anxiety. So again, it's just making sure that people understand that. Now, that's not a judgment question because someone might not come to me to go, I need to help with, to reduce my drinking. But it's those sorts of questions asked about sleep. So if someone's having difficulty getting to sleep or they're waking up tired in the morning, we know that there's probably something going on in their brain where they're trying to reduce the anxiety through the REM cycle. Or if you're particularly anxious, your brain thinks you're under threat. So obviously, if we're under threat, what's the one thing would happen if we sleep? We feel quite vulnerable. So the brain's like, don't go to sleep. So loads of questions, headaches, for example. So I ask, so if someone scores like yes, 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 and the good thing about the neuroscience of it, we can link it back to the initial consultation. So I do use, it's almost like a story of evolution, primitive man, how that works. We use the polar bear analogy a lot in solution focus. The polar bear is the problem. So, if the polar bear was wandering around outside, we would have to constantly be checking for it, and we would be constantly, hypervigilant, focusing on it. So that's the brain in that hyper checking mode, for example. So that is the threat response that people will be in. So essentially, our job is to, go, where is the polar bear? It's not there anymore. So you don't have to be worried. You don't have to be on high alert. We don't have to keep rechecking things. So again, the problem focused approach for some therapy can sometimes just reinforce that.
Yeah.
So with solution focus, it is very much a case of, I'm pulling someone away from the problem to put it into perspective by looking at all the lovely things that are going on around someone that the brain won't care about, because when we're in fight, flight, freeze, we are just looking for danger.
The
So
trouble.
the trouble. So all the lovely things in life that are happening, the brain's like, that doesn't matter, does it? Because so we forget about all the lovely things. The problem becomes the main thing. So by using a solution focused approach, essentially we're rewiring the brain to start thinking more positively about things, which essentially then our negative thoughts decrease, which means we're not catastrophizing, we're not spiraling away, making ourselves more stressed. So we're not in that vicious cycle. So, it's a good therapy, one for people that don't want to talk about the problems, but also just becoming more positive in life. So by doing that, I always say it's like a garden whereby we're planting little seeds every session and we're just nurturing them, watching them grow ever so slightly, so that we're moving towards it really gently, so that we're convincing the brain that everything's okay. Everything, we're not in a threat situation anymore. And I always say that growing that garden means we're getting more of those happy chemicals, which in solution focus, we essentially say the stress bucket, which is where all the stress in life comes in. So it's not wild animals anymore. It's debt, relationships, social media, but also our thoughts. Our thoughts fill that bucket up all the time. So if we're walking around with this massive bucket of stress, we're in that fight, flight, freeze primitive part of our brain where we're not being logical. We're not making an assessment of anything rational. will always go into that fight flight response. So that primitive brain isn't intelligent. It will always rely on previous behavior. So, and it's negative. So
Yeah.
with solution focus, our job is to empty that bucket through our sessions. So we spend more time on that part of the brain that we're using now, the prefrontal cortex. We're actually making an intellectual assessment of life. Things become easier. And I think that's what our therapy does, plus the hypnotherapy part, which, yes, we give lovely suggestions. We tend to use Ericksonian hypnotherapy, so it's indirect suggestions, so it's a little bit more comfortable in the brain. We use metaphor stories, so the client's brain will start going, I wonder how I can integrate this into what the solution is. So that solution part, where we talk about what is the solution to that problem, essentially the hypnotherapy side just embeds it. So it basically it supports the work that we do in the talking therapy part.
So if I was a client and I was nervous about, I don't know, public speaking, what would you be looking for in terms of a story to feel more comfortable and confident as a speaker? Is there a particular route or
To help someone with that.
what would be a good metaphor? If I was listening to this and I wanted to do public speaking, but I was really scared.
It would be anything around sort of knowing that you don't have to be perfect. I think a lot of the time it's perfection paralysis with people. So again, when we're in our primitive brain, we're not accessing that part. We have to remember things. So people tend to freeze. So for us, it will be that person is going to more likely be scared of public speaking if their stress bucket's full, because they'll be in the primitive mind. So all our sessions do really is come up with solutions that are going to create more of those happy chemicals, sort of like the serotonins, the dopamines. So essentially they lid the bucket. So by doing those small solutions, the stress bucket basically goes down. So the more intellectually in control, so they're less likely to have that fear response. So I think the talking therapy side is probably the most important. So that's the solution focused breathe therapy side. The hypnotherapy side, again, I don't use like really direct suggestions with people. So it will be something about, it will be a metaphor. And I use this book quite a lot. So I'm not plugging it. This isn't my book. So within it, me and you, for example, we can both look at the same story and me and you will take a completely different meaning away from this. So the metaphors are always sort of more of a guide. So it will be something about, I use one called the water drop, which is frozen to a branch, but then the water drop, for example, has to one day decide that it doesn't want to be frozen there anymore and just let the warmth from the sun, let it melt. So that's confidence, and then it drops to the floor, and then it gets the confidence to move into a river, and it doesn't know where it's going to go, but it's still having the confidence to go, do you know what? It doesn't matter. I've made a decision. I'm moving towards something. And then there's a lovely bit around, will it go downstream? Will it go to the equator? Will it evaporate to form a cloud circling the earth? And then will it form a geometric snowflake that will... So again, that is all around trusting yourself for me and just letting go and just being a bit more malleable. So again, metaphors, I guess there's a general theme, but the power comes from somebody in our solution focus approach coming up with that solution, then going into trance, because they're more malleable to suggestion. So they are more likely to do what they've committed to doing as their solution. And the hypnotherapy part. So I do have language patterns that, are around self-confidence and things. But if someone is extremely scared of something, by doing a language pattern that just focuses on that, we're essentially colluding with their problems. So when they're in trance, I personally think it's just sort of, they're just going to be thinking about something awful. So this is more generic, just helping their nervous system relax. And confidence, you can really wrap into anything. So they'll be thinking about probably the confidence and what that looks like for that particular solution, as opposed to, we don't do those language patterns whereby, by losing weight, we're going to tell you that every time you eat a bit of chocolate, it's going to taste like bonfire ash,
Glad you went bonfire ash.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not that sort of approach. It's a more softer approach.
So what would be an example of a language pattern?
So we've got usually a relaxer, so that helps the body relax. So when the body's relaxed, the mind can relax. And then there's usually something called a deepener, and it's always something going down something. So you'll hear the classic going down some steps, going down a path. It's very visual. So we use a lot of, sensory things to get people's imagination working and relaxing them. And then the language pattern is basically the suggestions. Now, some of the language patterns and deepeners can be combined. So you're in a story, but you're also being given suggestions. And sometimes it's the deepener and then the suggestion part. But it will be things around talking about confidence, past is the past, the future is the future. There's some imagery in there as well around things like, imagine all your worries just floating away from you in a cloud. So people are thinking about they are, and again, it's visual. So the brain is thinking about all these things disappearing. So there's language patterns for all sorts of things like self-confidence, self-assurance, boundary forming. So again, we don't in solution focus always prescribe to it has to be allocated to someone, because essentially what we need in our modality is we've had that conversation around what would be different, what would life be like if the problem was gone. So I suppose, do you want me to run through like what our session structure would?
Yeah.
So we get people to write down every night what's been good about their day. So we're changing the way the brain thinks about things. So we're helping the brain start thinking more positively, because when we're in our threat response, as I said, the brain doesn't really care about any of that. So we consciously have to make an effort, because our brain is negative anyway. It's designed to keep us safe. So every night, what's been good? It could be anything. So I had a nice cup of coffee, had a nice interaction with someone, what we're looking forward to, what we're grateful for, what's gone better, So it's just reaffirming that things are okay generally in life. And don't get me wrong, some people will really struggle with this because some things won't be going well, but there will always be something. There'll be, even if it's one thing. So as soon as someone comes into our session, I'm like, right, what's been good? Because I don't want them to come and tell me everything that's going wrong, because the brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So if they tell me everything that's gone wrong, the brain thinks it's happening again. So it will flood them with loads of adrenaline. They'll get into a threat response. So they won't be in that part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where they can come up with any solution. So again, I will ask them, how did you do that? We'll look for exceptions. So again, it's confidence building. It's really talking about the positives. And then we use a scale. So between 0 and 10, 0, worst you've ever felt, 10, most happy, content. Or as they develop into sessions, 10 would be the problems you've came for have gone. So where are you sitting on that scale today? So someone said a 5, great, halfway there, positive. If you went to bed tonight and someone waved a magic wand over you and a miracle happened overnight, but you didn't know that miracle happened, you woke up tomorrow a 6. What would you know? How would you know you're a 6, not a 5? What would be different? So people will come up with an emotion. I'd be more confident. And what would that change? What would be different? Who would notice? So we're starting to think about our life without that problem being there. So we're moving towards a solution. And we always come to an actionable thing. So as we start getting to an action, it'll be, what small thing could you do to get towards that lovely goal of X? And then we make it really specific so that the brain has a bit of detail. Because if we say, oh, in a couple of weeks, I might do this, to me, I always say it's like a wisp of smoke in the breeze, it will just disappear. But if we say at 10 o'clock on Thursday, where am I going to be? How long is it going to take? What am I going to do? So because they've come up with the solution themselves, I've not told them what to do, they are more likely to do it. Now, when they go into trance, when that critical part of the brain is switched off and they're more malleable to suggestion, they are extremely likely to do what they've committed to doing. So that essentially moves them forward towards the solution. So again, feel really good about doing it. Usually comes up in the what's been good the next week. Sometimes it doesn't. And I always say to people, you might not do it at 10 o'clock, because in the talking therapy, your brain might have thought in trance, actually, I might do something else. But I don't say to people, I don't sit and check, because they might do it next week, the week after. By them thinking that they have to do something and not doing it, it just fills up their stress bucket, because they think they've let me down, someone else let themselves down. So if it appears on a what's been good, I might remember it and go, oh, that's brilliant. But the same thing with the scale. We don't expect there to be a linear progression, because you might need to recalibrate the scale. You might have come in thinking you're a 5, but actually after a few sessions, you might have been 3, or you might have been higher, or something really bad happened that week, so you've gone down. So it's just a jumping off point. So every session is all around moving forward. So even if we've gone forward 4 steps and we've gone back 2, we celebrate the 2. Even if we've gone forward 4 and gone back 4, we've celebrated. It's fine. We move every time we arrive, we move forward. We don't focus on what's happened. And I think a lot of people, when they think they failed, will self-sabotage, and the primitive brain will take them down that path they've always gone down before, because that brain thinks it's keeping you safe by doing whatever you're doing that's essentially affecting your mood or whatever you're doing in life. So by having someone like me each week go, it's fine, forward. They get further than they've ever been before. It works really well for weight loss, actually, this modality, because you will see this and there'll be loads of patterns of failure. So the brain's got all this pattern of this isn't going to work. And as soon as it doesn't, you're like, oh, what's the point? Back to what I've always done. With this, you can't, because I'm essentially like your coach moving you forward. And over time, because I've not allowed that person to essentially go backwards, and even if they have, we've celebrated the forwards again, the brain starts rewiring itself. So it's like, actually, these small things are fine. I can do really small steps by myself. And it's like watching someone, I always say it's like there's a car in a ditch, and a lot of people, the wheels are turning, but nothing's going. And they're sinking a little bit deeper every time they're trying. My job is just to literally give them a little tiny push, because they know the direction they want to go in. But my job is just to help lift those wheels a little bit and support it out of the ditch so that they can go on their merry way. And essentially, my job is to make myself redundant as quickly as possible.
Yeah, therein lies the rub.
And it's lovely when people come back to you like a few months later, even a year later, and said, this is what's changed my life. And it's such a lovely feeling to watch someone come in one way and then see me for 6, maybe 12 sessions. And then they go, do you know what? I think I'm okay now. And then sometimes we space them out just to say, let's do it every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, because I need you to have the confidence that this isn't because you're seeing me once a week. And then 9 times out of 10, you'll get to someone on every 3 weeks and they'll say, do you know what? I think I'm okay now. And I'm like, brilliant. If you ever need a top up, or something happens where you feel like you just need a bit of a relaxing session or a bit of downtime, or you sort of need me to help you realign this, I'm here. But, good luck. And yes, it's been lovely. And as a therapist, there is sometimes times where you have clients that you warm to, and you're like, I see you every week, and it's nice to watch people progress. But obviously, like, my job is you come in, then you go. But, it's lovely when someone comments or does a little testimonial, and also people refer you as well. It's a really nice thing as a therapist, isn't it? To know, actually, I'm helping change people's lives.
Yeah, and I think it's so powerful. It's such a gift that we have. And it's beautiful, isn't it?
Mm.
So what do you want for your future? What would you like to, step by step, bit by bit?
So, if you had asked me this probably 2 years ago, I would have made all these plans, and, I'm quite a fast person. So even in the last year, and obviously I have supervision as well as a therapist. So I've got 2 supervisors, which I chose to have because I quite like learning from different people. I'm definitely one of those people that, I will constantly learn, I'll constantly reflect, I will constantly sort of look at feedback and go, oh, okay, that's a slightly better way of doing it. So if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have made all these plans and it would have been really fast. Because I think that's what my primitive brain wanted me to do. The speed was safety. So doing this, the course and counselling and the reflection, I think just allows me to live in the now. So I don't have sort of like rigid plans in place, because I actually just like seeing how things are going and, jotting down ideas. And it will always be when I'm not doing anything, I'll think, oh, this will be a good idea. So for me, being an integrative therapist, I definitely want to have my own practice in those areas. I'm doing mindfulness meditation training because I quite like group work. So I've started doing presentations to groups on things like imposter syndrome, procrastination, the science behind quitting, sort of for weight loss. And I actually really enjoy that group stuff. And I used to do that for my job, so why wouldn't I enjoy training? So, and again, solution-focused hypnotherapy and counseling, it lends itself more to individuals. You can do group solution-focused hypnotherapy things, and some people in our association do it extremely well. But I want to sort of do more group things in corporates, which is where my background is. So, taking that mindfulness meditation, going into work wellness programs, and just having a bit of a portfolio career again, and sort of having my individual clients, maybe doing some associate work, doing some corporate things, maybe things at some wellness events or health spas and things. And just to see what I like doing. So I think it's so early now to go, I want to niche. And I mean, I do a lot of work with the LGBTQIA plus community and also men's mental health.
Yeah.
I typically probably see more men than females, which I think is quite rare. I'm definitely talking to my hypnotherapy friends. So there's some of the areas that I've got, and obviously weight loss, because I used to be a personal trainer. So I've got a real thing. I love weight management and weight loss. So again, it's sort of like, do you niche out into a sort of what condition I can help, or who are my clients, or so there's so much you can do with this. So again, I just sort of sit in the now and go, do you know what? When the time comes, I've done all the training, I've thought about everything. I'm seeing such an eclectic mix of people with different varying presenting issues and wants and goals, that I'm quite happy at the moment just to go, I'm just going to see what I enjoy.
Where the water takes you.
Yeah, and I think that's like the frozen water drop thing. I think I probably use that quite a lot because I really resonate with that, to go, just see what happens. I take opportunities when I can. I work in a school as an enterprise advisor because I'm seeing teenagers. I've been doing that for a little while, so that's been really interesting for me. As I said, I work with men's mental health. I'm part of LGBTQ associations and things. So for me at the moment, it's just, always learning, always taking an opportunity, but not running 100 miles an hour into a direction that I don't know where that's going to go. So I think as a therapist, we spend a lot of time with people. So I have to make sure that I'm okay.
Yeah.
And, I think the key thing that I've learned over the last year as a therapist is, when I first started, it's just practicing what you preach. Because I think even as an HR person, I never had an appraisal really, because I was making sure everyone else was okay.
Yeah.
So I think if someone's listening to this as a therapist that's coming out of training, like, it sounds, that oxygen mask first before anyone else is so important, to do what you're telling your clients. And I learn from my clients as well. So I don't want to be seen as this guru of information. If I've learned from a client, I'll tell them. I'll say, what a brilliant suggestion. That's great. I might use that. So I think it's just being that person that's walking alongside someone and being vulnerable when you need to be vulnerable, being congruent. And I think counseling teaches us all of that as well, about, the unconditional positive regard, empathy, and genuineness. And I've definitely used a lot of my counseling skills in hypnotherapy, especially sort of when in the initial consultation people do get upset, and that's fine, because essentially we're seen as a solution. So, I've got my box of tissues just in case,
It's like having a poo out of your eyes, that's all.
Yeah,
Just
I
gotta get
mean,
rid of it.
isn't it? Like, I always say to people, like, if you give the miracle question, this is the question that no one's ever asked you. You probably never asked yourself. So if you need me to go away and make you a cup of decaf tea, because don't give caffeine because people don't relax, I'll just go make you a cup of tea. Like, silence is fine in this room. The brain needs time to think about things. There is no such thing as a stupid question. There is no such thing as, like, I can't be silent. This is someone's space, and I want them to feel extremely comfortable. And everyone's different. Everybody requires something different from this experience. So it's making sure you're still with it. You're still doing the modality that you're trained to do, but being malleable enough to go, we can't treat everybody exactly the same.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's lovely. And finally, what does your t-shirt say? Because we can see the top part.
It says your anxiety effing hates me.
I love it.
Yeah, so I think it's more about your anxiety should be afraid of me, because I'm going to sort of like put it back in its box, sort of thing. So I wear this all the time. And I think, it helps put clients at ease. So I'm pretty much wearing this t-shirt most of the time. You know, I just think it just helps diffuse, and I'm not making a joke of it. Like, that's not what I'm doing at all. But this works quite well for teenagers as well. So I typically will wear this for teenagers. I've got another one that says fed up of feeling meh. My classic one is what's been good, because after that's the basis of our thing. So like, with a little smiley thing. So yeah, I love doing stuff like this because I think it just helps people. It makes it more accessible to people, where it's like, this is a positive therapy. So you have to sort of practice what you preach with this sort of stuff. So I always say to people, whenever you meet someone in public, don't say, how are you? Say, what's been good? Because it helps them think about what's good. And you have a lovely, nice, positive conversation with them, which makes you feel good as well, as opposed to British small talk, which would be, I am okay, not bad, thank you, this has happened. So again, you're just filling up each other's stress buckets where you don't need to be. So again, it's just reframing the conversation.
Brilliant. On that note, I shall thank you, and thank you ever so much for our chat. That's been brilliant. Lots to take away there, and we'll put your contacts in the links as well, so people can reach out to you.
Yeah, I work online. I'm based in Bicester, and I do the free consultation, which can be done online. So again, that's the thing I said to you, like, no pressure. Just if anybody's struggling with anything, look at my website. There's lists of what I could potentially help you with. And you can also download a free relaxation audio on my website as well, which is, it's almost like self-hypnosis. So it's a guided bedtime relaxation story.
Lovely. Well, thank you ever so much, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.